Good evening and welcome to the Muse Center. Thanks for joining us today. We're excited to celebrate the work of Frances Walsh Ward and the release of her new book, her fourth, Soul Tattoos. My name is John McCarthy and I've been teaching at the Muse for a while and currently I'm part of the outreach program for seniors. Before we get started, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Muse. It's one of the largest literary centers in the country, offer online and in-person creative writing classes of all genres, all levels and ages. Our winter-spring 2021 schedule is online at the-muse.org. So be sure to check out our classes and workshops. All classes are currently virtual. The Muse offers tuition assistance and for all who need it. We don't want anything getting in the way of someone who wants to learn to write, and we do not turn anyone away. Whatever you end up paying for the classes, by the way, having taken a number of classes also at the Muse, it's well worth the price. Probably cheap with the price, actually. We offer hundreds of other literary free events during the year, like Fran's reading tonight. Teacher readings, book launches, writing clubs, and much more. Coming this month, we have a lot of exciting events, including a reading by Jeff Hecker on March 6th. So when you visit the Muse, the-muse.org, be sure to visit the events page to see what's happening. A quick disclaimer before this reading gets started. All work read from the readers is their original work is owned by the reader unless otherwise noted. Some of the work here today is published in print, what Fran will be reading from the book, unless otherwise noted. It's in print, it's available online, and some of the things that Fran and myself will be doing are unpublished. This is not in any way a stream of publication of unpublished works. Recording this event will be available on the Facebook page, on our YouTube page, and our website at the-muse.org after the event. Following the reading, there will be a question and answer with the author. If you are watching live and have a question you'd like to ask, either write it in the Facebook event page or in the YouTube comment section. Now let's welcome Fran Ward. Hey, Fran.
Hey, John, thank you very much.
Okay.
And I'd like to welcome everyone who is spending time with us today. And from whatever time zone you're from, you could be in Hampton, Virginia, as I am, or Norfolk, like John, or anywhere in the world, in another country, another continent. Welcome. So glad you came. I'm going to be reading stories from Soul Tattoos. This is my book, and Soul Tattoos are stories about people and incidents in my life that have made a lasting impression. I'm going to jump right in with the story. This is about the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. And it begins with a quote, as each of the stories begins, suggesting a theme that will run through the story. In our life, there is a single color, as on an artist's palette, which provides the meaning of life and art. It is the color of love. Marc Chagall. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, Art and Beauty. I own every major museum in the world. At least that's how I feel whenever I enter any one. Of course, I do not own the property rights or the artistic properties within. I am not responsible for dusting the collections, insuring them, or guarding them. Intellectually and emotionally, however, they are mine, all mine. I am grateful to everyone responsible for sharing and showcasing the masterpieces, the gifts of beauty, and the thought-provoking creations from time immemorial to the present and into the future. When I was 10 years old, my mother introduced me to each of the museums in Cambridge and Boston. The Peabody, the Agassiz, and the Natural History Museums at Harvard housed exhibits of archaeology, ethnology, and the glass flowers, which were one of the 7 wonders of the world at the time. My favorite museums housed art collections. After my mother's introductory tour series, I was free every Saturday to visit any museum of my choosing, solo. I lived in them. I loved them. I did my homework in them. Having carte blanche entry to galleries and music venues, I adopted an innate sense of ownership. I grew up in a student-friendly environment. Admission to cultural sites was free in Cambridge and Boston, and $1 for opera or BSO, Boston Symphony Orchestra, dress rehearsals. MIT and Harvard were an academic and intellectual playground. I am self-educated in art and music. I never took cultural electives in school. I was too busy studying important subjects like physics, but I couldn't help but learn to love both science and the arts in my own backyard. I combined my love of the arts and sciences at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. Located near Fenway Park, where I frequently sat in the bleachers to cheer on the Red Sox, the Venetian Palazzo is a personal display of architectural splendor from antiquity. It has European masterpieces and stunning formal gardens. I sat on a marble capitol in the courtyard under a Byzantine arch, using my slide rule for calculating physics homework problems, while admiring the palms and colorful courtyard garden and smelling the dreamy orchids and fragrant fruit tree blossoms. I rewarded myself for finishing my work each day by wandering throughout the immersive environments of art, architecture, flowers, plants, and textiles. I love Isabella Stewart Gardner's collections and her emotional approach. Exhibits are not labeled conventionally as they are in nearby MFA, Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. Isabella, she and I are on a first name basis, wants visitors to find their own meanings, an inductive approach, which I prefer. She generously built her museum for the enjoyment of the public forever. I was the high school girl who appeared daily, then vanished by closing. 20 years later, however, when I returned for a visit, a guard took my hand in both of his and said, "Welcome home, dear." They had always known me and welcomed me home. I had considered myself invisible, but my love of beauty had not gone unnoticed. I knew what I liked. Art opened my eyes and it opened my mind. I would spend hours at the Museum of Fine Arts. I loved the classics. I hated modern art. Then one day I visited the Fogg Museum of Art at Harvard. There was an exhibition of huge works by Nolan, Stella, and Lewis. I made it a point to memorize their names. I knew it was an important day. No one can change anyone else's mind, but you can change your own mind. And that's what I did. I loved this work. I started loving modern art for the first time and forever. I could still love the classics, while paradoxically loving another concept too. I knew then that I could be flexible and open-minded, and that I could have two conflicting thoughts at the same time. I was aware that it was my first conscious paradigm shift. Little did I know that my self-taught arts education would initiate my love of the arts and clarify my view of life. Everyone has a common denominator for making sense of the world. For some, it's music. For others, it's movies, a certain cuisine, or football. For me, it's a love of the arts, the various branches of creative activity, such as painting, music, literature, and dance, appreciated primarily for their beauty or emotional power. I had rheumatic fever when I was a child. I read Dean Ornish's book about transforming one's own heart. The book discusses the concept and practice of meditation as good for the heart. I went to a free introductory meditation class at the Edgar Cayce Center in Virginia Beach, the ARE. We were told to close our eyes and that appearing on the screens of our closed eyelids, there would be a word that would be the guiding principle of our lives. A word appeared. It was beauty. I was so disappointed. I thought my word was a shallow concept. I was thinking of beauty pageants, which I do watch as religiously as I watch award shows. They're a barometer of our cultural and mores. It was not until years later that I realized Truth and beauty are jackpot words. Beauty is the guiding principle of my life. True beauty is defined as the state of being authentic and sincere in a way that extends love to yourself and others. It feels real, safe, alive, playful, flowing, authentic, and life-giving.
Thank you, Fran. I would like to say, first of all, that I'm technologically challenged, especially tonight, it seems. So we're not going to see what Fran had originally planned, which was um, a showing of her book trailer. I've seen it. It's very nice. And basically gives an overview of the book. Are you going to make that available someplace, Fran?
I'll make it available
Okay, on your website or?
on my website or through the Muse or something, Facebook.
Okay, but it will be available.
Oh, and I hope you can see it. It's really terrific. It represents the stories in the book. There are the music was written by Alex Judah, a friend of mine, and it's good stuff. So I hope you will get to see it.
Fran, Sherilyn and Carrie say hello.
Oh, hello.
Is a by the by. I'm reading along here.
Thank you. Oh, friendly faces, even though I can't see your faces.
Yeah, but one of the things I was going to say as part of the introduction was that when we were first setting this up, one of the things that Fran did was send me your resume. And I've dealt with resumes for a while, and they always have education, they have experience, they have sort of activities, accomplishments, all that sort of thing. But it's all, and this is not just Fran's, but there's always just bits and pieces of a life. You know, it's in 2 or 3 categories. And the part that I'm most interested in, I think, from reading the book and watching the trailer, that Fran is also most interested in is what I call the intangibles, the things that are the sort of attitudes towards life. You know, like, so that you would find in the attitudes, you can see it a little bit in the resume also, but that Fran's, you know, she's mentioned things about herself already, but that she's one of the things I got was that she's a lifelong learner. People are important. She learns from them. And that's some of the stuff that was also showing up in the trailer, which, like I say, unfortunately, we won't be able to see. But Fran will be reading a second story. The first, the Isabel Gardner Museum piece, was from earlier in the book. And the second piece is actually the last named section of the book, and it's called Arnold. Fran?
Thank you. Arnold Hudgens, and the quote, Carpe diem, in Latin translated to seize the day, by Horace. Arnold Hudgens, retired merchant mariner. This is yours, honey. He didn't say much. We didn't talk a lot. Arnold and I would sit on his front steps and wave to the drivers who passed by the house and honk their horns to say hello. Anyone who drove down Bethel Peniel Road was a local. Matthews County didn't have strangers. They were come-here folk, but they couldn't help it. They didn't have the foresight to be born in this throwback to the 1950s. I first saw Arnold Hudgens on his wedding day. I was dressed to attend his wedding. He was dressed in a Southern gentleman's uniform of gray flannel slacks, a navy blazer, a white shirt, and a classic striped tie. He was tall and lanky, like Ichabod Crane. He walked slowly, hunched over, showing his age of 89 years. I caught a brief glimpse of him. He was not looking at anyone, but he was just plodding along the path to the church. The bride was nowhere to be seen, for this was her burial day. Arnold and his intended had been lovers for years. They kept their romance secret, but everyone knew. Maybe even her husband, the lighthouse keeper, knew. I know only that after the lighthouse keeper passed away, the lovers set a wedding date for soon after. This was that day. I didn't actually meet Arnold until the following week. I was extending my sympathies to the sister of Arnold's bride-to-be. She asked me to visit Arnold and cheer him up. I consented and drove to his farmhouse. It was love at first sight. We didn't say much. He did suggest, let's sit on the steps. So we sat on the front steps for hours that day, and whenever I was in Matthews. We would sit silently and point at the dragonflies, the wild turkeys, the hummingbirds, any pretty birds, or anything interesting that entered our field of vision. We didn't say anything, but we just nodded in appreciation of sharing a visual gift presented to us courtesy of Mother Nature. Arnold couldn't answer all of my questions. He didn't know why some fiddler crabs in the ditch by the road were right-handed and some were left-handed. He remembered the stable had held his horses, but he couldn't recall their names. He did know the grapes on the vines were scuppernongs. He used to plant crops, but then for years he mowed the 7-acre fields so they would look presentable on his land, which was sandwiched between two churches. Arnold lived a simple rural life. It ended simply and quickly. He was a broken man, having lost his true love, and after coming so close to living out their dream. One evening, the police scanner blared out the call for an ambulance. I heard the address needing the rescue squad. I rushed to Walter Reed Medical Center, where I was allowed to stand by Arnold's gurney as he was wheeled unconscious into the emergency room. The monitor beeped and flashed glaring numbers and jagged lines. I knew I was in the way. I knew that the prognosis was not good without being told, and I knew I had to hold his craggy hand until I was ordered to go to the waiting room. It was the eve of Easter. I stood there, numb. I did not feel anything. Then an Arctic, bone-chilling breeze blew through my body. I had never felt like anything like it. It was not a weather shift. It was not scary. It made me smile warmly. When the nurse entered the waiting room, looking down sadly, she announced, time of death is 12:20. I said, no, it was 12:06. I had looked at the clock when I felt Arnold pass through me and pass on. Arnold was true to his word. The 14-acre farm was mine. Staying at the house during renovations one night, the disconnected farmhouse phone on the kitchen wall rang. I knew who was calling.
Thank you, Fran. It's a touching story and very nice. Do you still have the land?
Sold the land.
Oh,
Yeah.
life is like that sometimes.
Yeah.
So anyway, one of the things that I found in reading the book is that although there's obviously an immediate connection through Fran to all these different stories, I think that there's also another connection in that all these people, and again, you'll see this in the book, have an impact on Fran, which she then in turn sometimes will share with other people later on down the line, which is always nice. One other thing that I found curious is that the book, in a way, is a type of memoir insofar as it just picks up bits and pieces, even though it's about other people. It also tells us a lot about Fran. And one of the things that she's done is that the stories are bracketed almost by quotations. And I think that there's much a part of the life of the story, of the memories, and tell us a lot about Fran just as much as the actual stories do. I mentioned we had a story from sort of towards the beginning, middle of the book. We had the last story about Arnold, and now we're going to go back to the beginning, almost, with a story that Fran, an experience of Fran's from sort of early part of her life, teenagerhood. It is called as you might expect, the prom.
The prom.
Fran,
And the quote, "A gentleman is one who puts more into the world than he takes out." George Bernard Shaw. The prom. Victor Lavoshko. "Will you go to the prom with me?" Victor asked. On the very first day of school, that question set off my senior year with a bang, not a whimper. Despite many other concerns, the two deepest causes of hand-wringing on this senior girl's mind were twofold: about the prom, who would ask me, and what would I wear? The intrigue and wonder for my year were squashed by Victor Lavoshko on day one. "Yes, I will," I answered him, but I felt deflated. His invitation took all of the fun out of it. Mystery was replaced with a foregone conclusion. I am not a person who will accept an offer and then change my mind if a better one comes along. I keep my word. The word to Victor was yes. I was locked into what had been anticipation of a dream that instantly morphed into my fate. It was set in concrete. A nice guy. Victor was blond and had Slavic good looks. He wore glasses and dressed conservatively, usually in chinos and a sports shirt. My mother liked him. He was that nice. My mother wanted me to marry a nice Lithuanian boy. Victor's Russian pedigree came acceptably close to meeting her requirement. Bearing my mother's seal of approval provided good enough reason for Victor not to be on my list of desired prom dates. Many a senior girl envied me, however, because I had already clinched a prom date. I was the only one who didn't seem ecstatic. Life is strange, and high school girls are even stranger. The anticipation of wrapping up high school had many classic universal facets. Taking college board exams, plus the daily stress of keeping grades up, was scary enough for any senior. But I had additional stressors of running against a rival in student class elections and working after school and on weekends. Pressure loomed large. Senior year proceeded at Cambridge High and Latin. Victor and I hardly knew each other, and we did not become much closer as the year progressed. He did invite me out for my first date ever, then took me to see the latest movie the first week it was showing, which included the opening scene of Julie Andrews singing on a hilltop. We went to a theater in Boston that was across the river from Cambridge. We had an awkward drive to the theater as we tried to break the ice. We didn't seem to have much in common that we could discuss. In the theater, an attempt at holding hands was fumbled. At 16, navigating social skills as part of growing up is a challenge. Some pick up the skills easier than others. Victor, however, seemed to know the rules that the rest of us were trying hard to decipher, and he attempted them bravely. John Valerio, on the other hand, was a person who tried hard but hadn't understood society's rules. A few missteps landed him in Swansea. The name of the city was synonymous with reform school. No one not enrolled there knew that that meant the residents of the therapeutic boarding school spent their days being reformed into demonstrating more mainstream behaviors than what came naturally to them. Somehow, somewhere in Cambridge during senior year, I met John Valerio, a shy, tall, dark, and handsome greaser with a cool attitude like James Dean's, complete with movie star looks and a black leather jacket. One day I invited John home for a cup of hot chocolate. My mother made the cocoa, served it to us, and joined us at the kitchen table for a polite, reserved conversation. Following John's departure, my mother pronounced that I could no longer be associated with John, whom I had already determined to be the love of my life. The reason for his being exiled, he had been in prison. What did you say, Ma? Only people who have been in prison drink from a cup by holding it with both hands. How did she know this ersatz fact? Truth was immaterial. My mother had decreed it, branding him for life. Henceforth, I never mentioned John again in her presence. I never invited him home again. Young love thrives. I accepted his black leather jacket as a badge of our passionate affection for each other. I continued to stash it under the stairs and would retrieve it and put it on when I was beyond the sight of my mother's watchful eyes at her vantage point at the second floor living room window. I wore my sign of fidelity, John's Rat Pack jacket, both to school and on the way home. then removed it before I rounded the corner and turned from Cambridge Street onto Elm Street. Wearing the distinctive words and the drawing of a rat in white served as suitable consolation for John's being exiled from my house. Secretly, away from family's eyes, I met John daily at Harvard Square. I juggled my part-time after-school work at Harvard to be able to maintain my social connections with friends and classmates. When prom time approached, my mother coordinated my look. Always in charge, she sewed a really pretty long fitted dress for me. The weight Empire lace bodice topped the skirt of heavier yellow fabric. She treated it as an artwork with pretty lines that went unmarred by the bulk of a zipper. Without a zipper, the chastity dress denied easy access. Prom day arrived. I had waist-length red hair, and my mother directed the beauty parlor on the corner to pin it up into a then fashionable beehive hairdo. Squirming into the dress was the only solution. My mother wrapped my high updo and my head in a plastic dry cleaning bag. She wriggled the dress onto me as I stood in Superman position, arms up. Once my head ejected through the neck hole, I ripped the bag off my face, gasping for air, but at least I was in. Victor drove to the house and came upstairs for obligatory pictures in front of the living room drapes. We drove away as all of the neighbors who had been awaiting my appearance watched and waved. We drove 2 blocks. Victor stopped the car and opened my door. He shook hands with John, who had been waiting nearby, and drove away as John led me to his motorcycle. I put on a helmet, then hitched up my long, tight mermaid gown, freeing my right leg to swing over the back of the bike. I held onto John's waist casually, and we zipped through traffic, weaving in and out of lanes, riding to the prom in style. We waited our turn for parking in line with both cars and limousines. Inside, we danced to the music of the day, the Song of the Year by Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs, and plenty of songs from the British invasion, including music by the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and Herman's Hermits. Besides that, we heard songs from our domestic shores, including music by the Beach Boys, the Temptations, the Righteous Brothers, and the Supremes. Capping the night off was Sonny and Cher's theme song. We danced all night, had our pictures taken, and returned to Victor's waiting car hours later, after the prom had ended. Victor held the car door open for me, and John drove away, waving. Victor walked me upstairs to say goodnight to my family and me. I could only suggest to my mother that gravity in doing the bunny hop had slithered the beehive hairdo from the top of my head onto my forehead, looking more like an alien growth. Who would have suspected that the cause was a motorcycle helmet? My hero, Victor, understood social skills, friendship, and maybe even love. During our 50th high school reunion, I wanted to thank Victor. It was Victor who had conceived the plan for me to attend the prom with John. I wouldn't break my word, but Victor had asked me what I wanted and honored my wishes. I found out that Victor had died, but his memory lives. His name was on the memorial table for lost classmates, but it didn't state the circumstances of how he passed. Victor was the kindest, most unselfish gentleman. E. Cummings is probably the school's most notable graduate, but Victor Lavashko is probably the most honorable 16-year-old ever to have attended Cambridge High and Latin School.
Thank you. Can I ask you a couple of real quick questions?
Yep.
I'm sure the audience is just dying to know. One, did Victor go to the dance at all himself?
No.
No. Okay, that was question one.
He wouldn't.
Question two, you were afraid. Did your mom ever find out what actually happened?
No.
Oh, that's interesting because I'm sure she must have had
And
sources somehow.
neither did my brothers, who might know now that they've read the book.
Okay, that's good.
I'm good at keeping secrets.
I'm sorry?
I'm good at keeping secrets.
Oh, okay. I'll make a note of that. Okay. You have one more story that you're going to read for us. And this is relatively brief, and it's The Sweets Lady. And following The Sweets Lady, we'll have some time for questions and answers.
All right. The Sweet Sicilian Lady, and the quote, "All you need is love, but a little chocolate now and then doesn't hurt." Charles M. Schulz. The Sweets Lady in Sicily, Nurturance. I departed the blacksmith shop and proceeded downhill, heading away from the historic Duomo region and towards the slip where my cruise ship was docked. I continued my quest for the perfect Sicilian seafood lunch. One promising restaurant after the next had menus in Italian, a good sign of authentic Italian cooking for Italians, as it's not aimed at tourists. Everything was closed. It was a Monday, but it was Easter Monday, a bank holiday in Europe. I was devastated. My stomach was growling. I had to find something. I came upon a convenience kind of store with outdoor cafe tables and chairs. According to the pictures, the shop featured ice cream. Inside, there was a refrigerated lighted pastry showcase with several shelves. I pantomimed to the lady behind the counter. Yes, she had made all of them. I don't have a sweet tooth, but Sicily is renowned for its pastries, especially starting with the cannoli. Different from our American version, and tastier, the sheep's milk ricotta gives theirs the characteristic tanginess. I couldn't decide. Each piece enticed me with its shape, the filling, or the embellishment. The aroma overall smelled heavenly. Sicilian sweet specialties are known as the scent of Sicily. I knew the names of some of the 10 most famous, but there were so many different styles that I had never seen before, which made for a confectionery quandary. I couldn't lose. Whatever I selected would be extraordinary. Finally, I pointed to my choice, and she shooed me out so she could serve me at a table on the sidewalk. It took her such a long time to pour me a cup of coffee and serve a pastry, but I was happy to wait since I had, after all, found something so delectable before returning to the ship. Finally, I heard shuffling of feet, rattling of plates and silverware, and humming. The lady appeared with a huge tray that a waiter would normally use to serve a whole table full of hungry diners. Laden with one piece of everything in the pastry showcase, the tray presented a Sicilian sampler for me. She beamed and arranged each plate onto my table and the table next to mine. She talked nonstop, describing, gesturing, taking a portion on a fork or spoon and feeding me one mouthful, one example, one bite at a time. I'm sure I must have been fed as an infant, but certainly not as an adult. She was nurturing, an earth mother, awaiting a reaction after delivering every taste sensation. I gave verbal and nonverbal responses to the most angelic tastes. Sounds, hand gestures, and eye rolling in delight came naturally. So did the next bite of the next delectable treat. I couldn't choose a favorite unless I chose her, for she was the sweetest in all of Sicily, I am sure. My day in Messina had elements of the expected and unexpected, the planned and the spontaneous. The day was filled with people shining their lights and presenting their best sides to a stranger by being themselves, no prompting required. It was a day of authenticity and joy, a day of sweetness.
Thank you, Fran. Okay, I'm
Welcome.
muted again.
I'm muted? No. Okay.
The technology wars continue. Thank you. I was applauding there and couldn't
okay.
get to the microphone button fast enough. As I mentioned just before, the sweets lady, Fran would encourages and welcomes questions and will answer them the best that she can. While you're writing things down, I've got a couple more questions, more about the book in general. The first question is, of the people that you chronicled in the story, 39, 40, 42?
Oh, I don't know.
Or so.
I don't. Yeah.
Are there any that you would, if you were traveling in that area again, are there any that you would want to go back and talk to? And if so, what would you like to say to them?
Oh, that's a good question. Sometimes you just can't plan things, and you can't have a do-over. So I just take my life as it happens. If I see these people again, if I go to these places again, wonderful, we'll continue. But there are plenty more adventures out there. And I meet people all the time. And some of them are just regular people, and some are extraordinary in extraordinary situations. And it's just kind of fun. You never know what you'll see or what will happen. I don't live my life looking for stories, but I look back and think, oh, that was pretty cool. Maybe I should write about that. Or the writing just comes naturally. I just sit down and I write, and it turns out to be a story.
Mhm. Are there any stories that you wanted to incorporate but couldn't?
There were a lot that I just had to narrow it down. But I was thinking, who else would I have written about that I didn't have on my list? And there was one man one time in an art gallery. I had something on display. I'm a glass artist. And I put a piece on the wall, and it had marbles, glass marbles. And there was a presentation in the auditorium. And during that presentation, it was hilarious, I thought, because all the marbles fell off the wall from my art. And I think of myself as a performance artist. Everything is alive. My art is alive. The stories are alive. Fortunately, we're alive. And I thought it was great. And this one man came over to me, and he was just enchanted. And he wanted to know, what do you do that's big? And I said, well, I don't do anything that's big. They're all about that size. And he said, you should do things that are big. And I thought, interesting, because sometimes in life, there are these angels who just show up and tell us what our assignment is and tell us what we're supposed to be doing next. So it was soon after that I was invited to bring something to Japan to display. And they wanted to know ahead of time. And I had had a dream the night before that I was going to be in an art show. So I was prepared. So I described it briefly, and they said, well, how big is it? And I said, well, it can be 3 feet by 3 feet. And they said, can you make it bigger? And I said, oh, yeah, I can make it 13 feet by 13 feet. What am I talking about? I don't know. I've done things that are 13 inches by 13 inches. So that was the beginning of my doing art installations. I've been doing indoor and outdoor art installations. So I made that 13-foot by 13-foot piece, two-sided, and it was the first piece that ever hung from the ceiling of Tokyo Municipal Museum.
Mm.
Very exciting. So there are stories that go along with that. Then I made crab henge locally, and it's crab pots stacked on each other to make crab henge. And it was a destination. People would go and have their picture taken in front of crab henge. So here was this man that I didn't write about. I don't know his name. I never saw him again. Um, but he told me what I should be doing. And I'm glad I took his advice because it was right. It felt right, but I didn't know it. But he saw it in me.
Um, just a reminder, if you want to ask a question, use the comments section on either YouTube or Facebook, wherever you're hanging out at the time. And we do have a question here from Maine. Okay, it's from the Muse. Do you have a writing routine?
Yes, I write all afternoon. So I do the rest of my life in the morning and have lunch, meditate, and then write.
Okay.
That's the routine.
And have you bumped into the person yet that provided direction for the next step or the next place you're going?
Well, I think I have. So I have ideas, and these are all based on my Native American experiences of sweat lodges, vision quests, um, uh, that kind of thing. That uh, portion of my life. I'm thinking of a fiction based on nonfiction, based on my experiences, and I may get into some past life stuff and incorporate my metaphysical tenets.
Mhm. Have you ever thought about um, doing some sort of fleshing out the trilogy of the first two novels, Travels with Ellyn series that you
There's always
started with?
that. There's always um, the goddesses and the dragons and the castles and more more of those creatures to explore. Yes, I am considering that.
Okay. Sherilyn says that she's honored to know you and would like to know what you consider to be the ultimate adventure.
Oh, I'm sure I haven't had it yet. Um,
The ultimate is the last one. So yeah,
yeah, I'm lucky. What is the second to the last? The penultimate?
penultimate, yes.
Yeah,
I got
I
into
should
trouble with
the
that a couple weeks
penultimate.
ago.
Um, I'm game. I'm a guinea pig. Guinea pig. I'm the first person to volunteer for stuff, and if someone wants to do something or go somewhere, I'm in. I want to do it. So I love surprises. So who knows where the next adventure will be? So Sherilyn, you want to take it with me, or anyone? I'm up for grabs.
Yes.
As soon I have my second COVID shot on Saturday, so I figure 2 weeks after that, I'm free to go. So if anyone is has any idea, let me in.
Okay. Are there any other questions that you want to send Fran's way?
I could read another story.
Okay.
All right. I had this one typed up. The log cabin. I don't have the quote, but it's survival in my first teaching job. It takes 10 cauldrons of snow and 8 hours to make one cauldron of water over an open fire. My main task one day during a blizzard was to convert snow into drinking water. I hoped I had enough firewood inside to achieve my goal and to last through the numbing night. I had nailed a tarp to the logs inside along one wall to prevent snow from blowing in between the logs where the chinking had broken away. When I hear the expression blanket of snow, I know that in the log cabin it was an accurate description. Waking up that morning in my sleeping bag, I was covered by nature's duvet. The wind howled, but the dogs howled louder. I opened the cabin door, holding it tightly so the wind wouldn't rip it off its hinges. The 3 dogs bounded through the deep snow and into the cabin. They shook and splattered snow and ice and wet dog spray as they vied for a warm spot in front of the fireplace. The room lost heat from opening the door and introducing 3 chilled critters, but I had to give them shelter. They could have eaten more, but I shared what I had. I stoked the fire, piled up a few logs, patted the dogs again, watched them curl up together for warmth, tucked myself into my sleeping bag, and bawled like a baby when I heard the dogs lap up the entire cauldron of water, my whole day's survival effort. I was exhausted, hungry, thirsty, cold, and miserable. I was alive. Morning came with bright sunshine, a new attitude, and a new day. I opened the door and the dogs raced out, each step in snow deeper than their height. They were on their way, continuing their direction from the previous night along Hogback Ridge in the Plains, Virginia. I took one step up to my thigh in snow, then the other foot, same. The snow was so deep. It was laborious walking. I was getting nowhere, slowly. I was looking for the chicken house. I couldn't see it. The snow was so deep I was standing on top of it. Most of the year, I enjoyed living in the simple log cabin. My nearest human neighbors were 3 miles away. Companionship was provided by Black Angus cattle grazing and the woodland creatures, wild turkeys, hawks, and eagles in various varmints. I loved to shout, "Hey, groundhogs!" and watch dozens pop up their heads from their burrows like a live game of whack-a-mole in the fields. I cheered for the fox that raced by, followed by the Middleburg hunt, starting with sniffing, running, baying foxhounds, followed by the hunters and jumpers ridden by traditionally attired men and women of the Middleburg hunt in scarlet with apple green collar and breast buttons with initials MH. There would be no kill that day, but that would not deter the liveried hunt breakfast. I was a recluse on the mountaintop, but I drove my Datsun pickup truck every day to the Hill School, a country day school where I taught fifth graders basics and extras. What a wonderfully exciting experience we all had then and there. A crowning achievement was directing Antigone by Sophocles in the most moving production. There were no dry eyes in the auditorium. There is ample opportunity for people watching everywhere in the world. whether far from home or in an old-fashioned general store on the Plains Road on my way home to the log cabin. While I was waiting my turn, the little bearded man pointed to a shelf. "Let me have a jar of them pickle. I forgot about pickle. It's been a long time I had one." He was polite, endearing, and memorable. I had visitors often. Among the most memorable were my two friends returning from serving in the Peace Corps. They said that they hadn't eaten anything but cassava in whatever country they were in that has probably changed its name several times. Everything I served was simple and appreciated. Dessert came with deja vu, as they said they had forgotten about strawberries. It had been so long since they had them. My cousin Philip visited upon his return from Russia in a State Department position. As soon as I arrived home, he said he had to leave. He said he had never been so afraid as he was after parking his car at the base of the mountain and hiking up the rocky, rutted road and running across the fields. I asked why he ran. He said he didn't know if outrunning a bear or climbing a tree would be better. I asked why he would do either. He said even in Russia, he had not seen so many bear tracks. I said I hadn't seen or heard of any bears. He pointed to the field covered with the bear tracks he was referring to. He thought the steaming mounds were bear poop. What he saw were cow pies, meadow muffins, fertilizer left courtesy of the Black Angus. Humor is everywhere, even in the cosmos, even in a log cabin.
You unmute. Thank you. I'll try it again.
Thank you.
It was very nice. It was light and friendly and a little, like you say, a little bit of comic relief. Carrie wants to know if you feel or think meditating helps your writing. Is that why you do it right before you start writing?
Definitely. Absolutely. Sometimes the ideas and the words come in the dreams, and sometimes they come in the meditation. Sometimes there's nothing in the meditation, and then as soon as I sit down with my computer, there are the words all over again. Yeah, meditation definitely helps with everything.
Okay. Karen asks if all of your stories are from your current life or some from past lives.
Oh, I love that question. Um, they're hard to separate sometimes, but yes, all of these are from a current life. However, some of the characters I know are from also past lives that I had lives with before and resolving things with in this life. And for my next book, which I'm thinking is going to be called Quantum Warrior, but we'll probably change that title. There'll be one character who is me this life, and the villains, the warriors, are going to be. I've been a warrior in every war mode that you can imagine. So the warriors, those characters are going to be the past life characters. So I'll be incorporating them. Warriors and druids and Vikings and samurai. Love it.
Yeah. Well, I'm very for being able to do that. In my own case, I regard past lives as things I did in my 40s and 30s and 20s. And on that sad note, anything else you'd like to comment before we start winding it down?
Just a I share my stories and art in hopes that you can walk in your shoes alongside me. I hope that they might entertain you or remind you of people and episodes in your own life. I'm grateful to the Muse for this book launch. Much of Soul Tattoos was written in the Muse writing rooms. See themuse.org for writing classes and events. Thank you also to Norfolk Arts for hosting and posting this event. And thanks to my moderator, Dr. John McCarthy. And thank you for joining me today. And I look forward to hearing from you and your soul tattoos. And remember that you make a mark and are soul tattoos on others.
Okay. Thank you very much. And we look forward to rereading this one and the next one.
Oh, and they're available on Amazon.com, ebook version or paperback. And they're also available or will be on my website, franwalshward.com. And my email, until the website is completed, franwalshward@gmail.com. So, and the books are also available at Hampton Stationery.
Very good. We
And
appreciate it.
if you're in Hampton, contact me and we'll get together.
Okay, thank you very much. And thanks to all of you for attending and for your questions and just general support. Remember, that's the Muse, THE-MUSE.org. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, everyone.